It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Welcome to The New Next, a podcast that addresses current events and how they will impact the future. And 2 years is not a lot of time because you're basically either going to look in, do we have anybody on staff? Nope. We have to look for someone outside who doesn't know Disney culture, which is the whole problem. So it makes sense if Apple has the money and they can get past some anti-compete law clauses.
I don't know how they couldn't, given that they approved MGM. So,
well, because MGM was not a distributor. So basically, almost every distributor has their own streaming service right now.
Yeah.
And then there's a couple streaming services that are not technically distributors.
Yeah, but technology wise, I feel like that's so fragmented that it's not really a.
So this is
issue.
Part of the thing of laws not being caught up with what's actually going on. So we talked about that some when we talked about AI, of how we're always. I mean, on a side note, that just kind of gives some perspective of why we know that the laws are not there. When they were writing most of the laws, they never thought that a congressperson would ever give inside information about the stock market to their family. They actually thought that congresspeople were honest enough that they were, or at least they wouldn't, and if they got caught, that they would do blah, blah, blah. Well, the laws are now 50 years, 60 years old that, and of course now the current congresspeople don't want to write a law to punish their families from just, following the rules. So this is where it's going to get kind of weird, and it might take more time. So Iger might start the sell. Like if he just started today or this week, I would expect by next year, maybe even as a Christmas present, that's when we start hearing Apple is in the process of buying Disney or Netflix or whoever else. But I would say Apple has the strongest chance.
Disney makes much more sense based on what you said from the technological synergy, but I think just the culture of the two companies.
Yeah, and but this also, so what this presents to Apple though, and I've only talked about the Disney side, and I apologize. I know we have this great intelligent man here, and we're not getting much of his insight. Is Apple has purposely tried to play the cool card for since Steve Jobs came back to it. They purposely said we're only going to make X amount of product, and then they created the iPhone. And they broke all of their rules previously on what they would say, where the iPhone alone was it went from I think I want to say like the first year it ended up replacing 50% of all their profit. Second and third year, basically the coolness of having an Apple computer at one time, like, oh my goodness, you must be rich or you must be really involved in this certain kind of industry. Like it was a big deal. The fact that Apples could last for 10 years, like so cool. And then all of a sudden they do these smartphones and they do these iPads and tablets and stuff. And they're like, anybody can buy it. We're not limiting it anymore. So there's already kind of a turn there. And it's one that Steve Jobs has been on record a couple different times of regretting because he really liked playing the cool card. So you acquire Disney. You can't even pretend anymore that you're just playing a cool card. You're no longer just a technology company. You're now saying you're a worldwide multimedia power industry. And I will shut up now because I've talked a whole bunch. And again, Joel and you haven't had as many opportunities to tell me where I'm wrong.
Outside of Disney, I think it's interesting to talk about these larger, very large companies though too, and how they continue to grow. What they look to do, it's long enough ago that I don't remember exactly where it came from, but the idea that Amazon is so big and it already is in most of our lives, how does it, as a public company, your stock price goes up if you grow and you beat expectations. If you stay static and generate a bunch of cash, your stock price doesn't go up. It's about continued growth. And so where do you find that when you already control most of commerce and internet infrastructure?
Yeah.
And there are only a few places you can go. And so they're looking at, expect to see that Amazon and all these places start going into healthcare. That's something that a lot of money gets spent on. There's always people, more people in the world. And so
it's a third of the U.S. economy.
Where do these companies go to continue to, build and grow? For Apple and Disney, I feel like Apple, the perennial story is that they just have piles of cash. They are not super acquisitive. They just generate a lot of free cash flow. But what do you do with that? How do you grow? What kinds of synergies and things can you do? And so, it's always an interesting discussion to talk about. Even if it sounds a little esoteric or something, no, it's something that these companies are thinking about, and it's a make or break thing. If you can bring in, new revenue, new growth, bring products into those areas,
right.
They have to talk about it.
At that scale too, there's a lot of I would say tax and financial decisions that drive strategy by the company. I'll probably use the best example is when Microsoft used a bunch of cash sitting in Luxembourg or Luxembourg entity that hadn't been paid taxes on the U.S. to buy Skype. So they're basically able to buy Skype at 40% lower the price. So when you're at that large and you're such a global company like Disney's probably got a lot of cash. I know some of this is changing with the global minimum tax that they've stuff, but when you're generating hundreds of billions of dollars and you're talking about having a $10+ billion maybe financial spread by using cash to buy a company overseas versus bringing that home, paying taxes on it, and then trying to create something out of scratch, right? It's really hard from Iger level financial manager CEO to not go out and buy a premium product like Disney that's already doing it really well and see how you can implement their earnings into your income statement.
Right. And I think this is a personal opinion. You guys might, I'll just say it and then you guys do whatever. But I think Iger and even Eisner did so much stuff for Disney. He expanded the availability of people to stay on property, 500, 700%.
Yeah.
Where there used to be
cool.
3 or 4 hotels that were actually Disney owned. And now there's over 30, 40. He created Disney Cruise Lines, which quickly was competitive in the cruise line industry as being quality, not just like you have Goofy running around all the time, like literally a quality cruise.
If you apply that experience to anything, it's going to be quality.
Right. And one of the things that, and I think Eisner was really forward thinking based especially on the technology and the avenues available. But I've always been critical of Iger because I don't have a problem with buying Marvel and Star Wars and stuff, but those were his successes. The big gripe from Disney fans, park fans, is there hasn't been an intellectual property that Disney created on their own except for Stitch, and who ended up becoming a big seller. I think Apple has the capabilities, and we talked about Roku, some of the selling stuff in the past. I think Apple has the availability, and especially from what Joel's been telling us about with the AI technology and stuff, Disney already has everything in place that you just need somebody to be able to oh crap, I really enjoy that shirt that Mickey Mouse is wearing. And you click on it, however that works, and you can go ahead and go to the Disney store and buy that shirt immediately, without even thinking about it. I think Apple brings that kind of presence that we can say that this is going to be a reality, as opposed to Disney. Disney doesn't think that way. They're thinking still, how can they get more people in the parks? How can they get more people to watch the next Marvel movie?
Well, and we talked about this when we talked about their Roku integration partnership with Walmart a long time ago.
Yeah.
I think from like exactly what you're saying. So usability sense, if you're watching a video on Amazon Prime, you can press down and see all the characters that are in there and click, or the actors, click on their bios and follow up through that chain like that. Same exact functional experience could be done with ID tags on clothes and merchandise too. So,
and I think
that's a good point, because you have your most loyal buyers there and Disney purchasers. I've never met anybody more loyal to a brand than the most hardcore Disney fans.
And I think on top of that is Amazon with MGM and Netflix with whatever they're doing. These aren't primarily technology companies. These are primarily, Amazon has a little bit more flexibility because of all the things that they've become to encompass, but originally it was a bookseller, and they've slowly built it on where now we don't even think about books anymore at all. Whereas Apple is a technology company, and, Apple's best sellers outside of the iPhone, which is more of a popular thing, is actually like the mainframe servers and stuff, the type of, like the things that they actually make their bucks on outside
the business services.
Yeah, business services type stuff. And most people don't think of Apple that way. That's not the brand that they have, but they're the ones continuing trying to find ways to make business. And Joel, you feel free to just go like, nope, that's wrong. But they're trying to make the ways for anything that's computer related that it's top notch, maybe a little pricier. I don't know on that part, but it's definitely the top notch. Whereas to do Final Cut Pro, it moved it from a thing of where, oh, this is cool, to being, this is still the technology that everybody's either basing their movie production off of. And now that that's becoming more standardized, we need to be able to have computers and servers and stuff that can actually handle the rates of animation and the rates of fill in the blank. And that's where I think Apple can really push this technology forward. Sorry, Joel, go, please.
No, this is super interesting because it's not something I'm as well versed in. So it's really been, thank you for educating us. I have like a million things to Google now. And it's really timely too, because they're talking about that changeover, right? And it's
it's interesting to think about it in this merge though, because you said earlier you called MGM like a content delivery mechanism or something like that. And I kind of think like Disney's kind of like that too. They have you have Apple, which is a digital content delivery mechanism, essentially. You're either delivering content, you communicating with each other, or you communicating with the internet. And you kind of have this like merging of a traditional content delivery mechanism through physical locations and stuff like that, merging in and potentially getting some of the synergies that they have of really going into this digital framework where you have that digital foundation too.
Right. So MGM is a movie studio. I mean, I know it's more than that, but it's a movie studio. Their goal was to make content, and that's all they provided. Disney decided early on, I say early on, 30 years after the creation of, Snow White and some of this other stuff, they decided to build these amusement parks. And so they went into a completely different sphere of entertainment, and they found that they can make more money doing this entertainment. So it started small, but in travel.
But they're still they've still historically delivered goods through the digital world rather than through a technology mechanism through your phone.
They haven't created technology. They did try a 4D type style when Fantasia came out the first time. That bombed miserably.
So I'm just talking about kind of like the point of sale, where the money's coming through.
Because even in the parks, the way that Disney used to be is they would have companies who were generally like AT&T, Apple. They would come in and they would sponsor rides, and they would have a way of using technology. So there was a lot of technology investment with Imagineers were working with, AT&T to create this kind of thing. So Disney has always been very pro technology, but they're not the ones who
They're not a
developed the
technology first
Yeah,
company,
yeah. So that's why I think like Apple in particular really allows them to potentially move forward in a way that some of these other companies, like, and I hope my friend doesn't like beat me up and stuff. I remember how much stress her husband was going through of trying to get the platforms ready, especially when they had the deadline of when Disney Plus was going to announce and stuff.
Yeah.
It was extreme stress. And even now he's going several days without sleeping. But he's flying all over the world and he's coming home, to watch his daughter perform in a concert with no sleep and then just going and flying back out because of all the stuff that's going on. And I'm sure this is going on in every streaming service to a degree, but it's it's harder for Disney to do streaming than it is for Apple to do streaming.
Well, when you're doing something for the first time, you haven't gone through where it's broken everywhere.
Right. Absolutely.
And the expectations, everything that they do is at such a scale. So like, since it's more my forte, I guess, like, you think about a hedge fund managing 400 million versus $50 billion. It's really hard to get excess returns when you're managing $50 billion versus 400 million. Just the size that they have to do everything at whenever they do anything for the first time and they haven't gone through that full scale deployment and kind of worked up to it. It's like just going out and running a marathon for the first time. There's Joel could, Joel could probably say this. There's only so much tests that you can build into applications. And then when you get out there and see it live fire, that's when the real magic happens.
Right. And I
mean, don't you agree to some extent?
Yeah. I'm also just really curious to see, like, everybody's building their own platform right now. Like, and again, in the next couple of years, I'm sure there'll be an infrastructure provider that provides like massive scale video serving and all that kind of stuff. And it makes it easier for, each company to serve this kind of content well. It's so odd to me. You pop open one of the apps on your TV, your smart TV, and one of them is horribly slow and it's just is a pain to use. And the next one is blazing fast, easy to search, whatever. And,
yeah.
The underlying infrastructure of all this is going to be commoditized and pulled out in the future. And so, you aren't going to have people who aren't in their wheelhouse diving into it anymore.
Yeah.
Kind of like a Wix. Just because you know how to build a website doesn't mean that you should.
Okay. I apologized about that. Yeah, well, and I guess there's some cool things like, and I do apologize because Joel, you are the hero today. This is something that I didn't even realize that I was paying attention to as I was paying attention to it. When I'd listen to news reports and stuff about where Disney tried to start an interactive video game company, it eventually was the copy of the, the little token things that you put on your control. I can't remember the exact thing, but the amount of iterations they went through that with the public that failed. And I understand technology fails in public, but Iger, and like now knowing that Iger wanted to merge with Apple before, it makes it all the more like, oh crap, what would have happened because Disney spent a good 8 years trying to find ways to break into YouTube type things, to getting into video game type things. Again, the content for the video games have always been super, awesome, but they've never been able to do a good, they try to start their own video game console, but that's not their area. Their area is creating cool things to play on the console, not to make the console.
Well, I think to go to Joel's point earlier, like when you're a Disney, when you're a large corporation, your expertise at that point is to deliver profits to shareholders.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
like your legal job. And if you're good at your job, you're a capital allocator. You're not creative, basically.
Right.
And there's a lot of companies that I would say a lot of large companies don't take enough risks, and that's why it's encouraging to see them start some of these like labs, like say at Disney Labs, Creative Labs, or something that share the infrastructure but can just do whatever they want, or like the moonshots for Google. Like I don't know if Disney has something like that, but it's really hard for a company CEO to stay in their job if they're like, well, we're going to change everything that got here. You know, the board's probably not going to let them do it. And if they do, they're going to probably let them dip their toe in the water, which a lot of times doesn't really work unless you're committed. And it's just when you manage that much revenue, it's really hard to do anything that might be unique or different that can potentially provide any sort of substantial risk to the business.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I think even with like, so I said that the reason why Chapek got fired was ultimately Scarlett Johansson, and then some of these other things. But also, as you just said, the bottom line is they lost $15 billion this past quarter. They've lost $22 billion this year.
Wow. In 2022?
If I might have some of that off, but I'm pretty sure that was what I read.
Yeah, that's pretty intense.
But it's so as much as I say it's all these other things, you know, the reason why he got through the Scarlett Johansson thing in 2020 is because Disney Plus made billions upon billions of dollars.
Yeah.
And every quarter it was fine. 2021, 2021, billions of dollars. Everything's fine. Doesn't matter that the parks aren't making anything. Disney as a whole is making money. But Disney didn't make money this last quarter. They lost money. And he was on thin ice because of all his controversy. That made it that much easier. Like, well, you know what? He's had one bad quarter in 2.5 years. No, he's always been on the, like, they would like to have fired him probably earlier, but money was coming in. And so the shareholders held a higher position. So that is something that I don't like to say. I wanted to say that Disney made a good moral choice, but it was financial.
Well, I think this is really interesting. And as always the case, whenever a CEO returns to the company that they've been for a long time, really root for them to succeed. I hope this is the case too. Unfortunately, that's not historically been the case. It's usually tarnished their legacy. And I don't feel so, you know, we talk about Apple. Apple's a good case where Jobs came in and built on his legacy. You know, he was kind of looked at as a twit, I'd say, when he left originally. But I think Iger will be pretty successful. He's still probably the cultural heart of the company, even though he's a nameless or a corporate suit. But yeah, I mean, he really is. It's interesting to see the strategy play out here in the next couple of years.
I know. So my cousin owns stock in Disney, and he threatened over the past 2 years, like he's like, I'm going to sell my stock in Disney because I hate Bob Chapek. Like that's how much. And I think that's I think he's a great example of the general sentiment of the regular Disney person.
Yeah.
Who's hardcore, but really loves it. Again, I want to say Bob Iger was not loved by the parks people as much as the entertainment, the movie industry type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So Bob Iger solidifies himself if he's able to find a company like Apple who buys Disney for a great amount of money, because he doesn't look like a bad guy in this. And he gets a paycheck, and he doesn't have to find a successor because he's obviously not talented or skilled in finding a successor.
I mean, that's always the best, the best course of action when you're a politician or a CEO and you got a hard decision is to get someone else to make it.
Yeah. And just so if people want to know where I got a lot of this information, because oh, Mike, you really care about Disney. The book Disney Wars was written in like 2008, 2006. It's a 30-hour Audible book. But it's really, it goes through the history of Disney and what led to the rise and fall of Eisner specifically, and talks about how Iger's history at ABC was not always as positive as people might want to believe it was. But if you would like to learn more about the New Next podcast, find us at thenewnextpodcast.com, where you can suggest a topic you would like for us to cover. If you enjoyed what you heard, share the podcast, tell a friend about it, or rate us with 5 stars.